A lot of people still kind of coming in, but it is 10 o'clock. So I think we'll get started here. Paul, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, yes, I will, as long as we'll have some more people coming in, and it's great to see the examples and the comments that people are leaving down below as a start. And I think it really, maybe it's just because this is a WiLS meeting, but it really does highlight the collaborations and the value of that. So hopefully that's a great way to get started today. So good morning, everyone. I am Paul Washley. I'm the current WiLS board chair. I want to thank you all for joining us today. And more importantly, I want to thank you for all your work over the last year. The adaptability, collaboration, and care for our communities that you and our libraries and staff have shown are really a beacon of what we can accomplish together. This year, in the face of endless challenges, whether it's the pandemic and shifts in our communities, social justice and systemic racism, economic struggles, and budget funding, you have sought to serve and continually rebalanced to the sifting sands underneath us through collaborations, evaluation, and prioritization. The world of libraries does not stand still, we know that, and WiLS continues to weave our ideas and actions together into the collaborations with each other and our communities that provide us the resolve and energy not only to face these challenges, but to actively work to reduce the impact they create around us. This is why I'm excited to have our guest speakers today joining us to talk about how they are creating the needed representation and diversity, expanding and serving our communities, and seeking deeper connections within our libraries and throughout the areas and people that we serve. Our ability as libraries to provide a safe space and to recognize the value of individuals can help us all raise up people and ideas that not only provide knowledge, but work to provide pathways to a more engaged, informed, and respectful society. The work that each of us do, the projects, the collaborations we highlight today, the energy and exhaustion we've given to each other in our communities this year, and the time and reflection that hopefully we've given to ourselves, all make our libraries, our communities, and our collaborations stronger and more meaningful. I'm grateful for the connective fabric that WiLS provides that weaves us together. And I'm thankful for all of you who've made time today, or whenever you're watching this recording, to learn from each other and to accomplish more together. For myself and all of us on the WiLS board, thank you. And thank you, Jennifer and WiLS and all the staff for your work this year, but for today as well, and for organizing our time together. And with that, let's get started.
Thanks, Paul, for that wonderful welcome. Good morning, everyone. I hope your corner of the state is as sunny as it is here. It feels like a great day for our member meeting. We're really pumped. Before we get started, I would like to ask everyone to just simply pause, take a breath with me for a moment to recognize the heroes within our libraries, those of you here, your colleagues across our libraries and our cultural institutions. 2020 has been a year of tremendous sacrifice for many, and I want us to take all a moment to reflect and honor our colleagues and friends, for those who put community needs above their own as frontline essential workers during a global pandemic, for those grieving the loss of loved ones due to COVID-19 or dealing with the impacts of extended illness, and for those continuing to actively resist and reject racism and oppression. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our WiLS board. So you've met Paul, our chair. He's been our fearless leader and an excellent voice, keeping us focused and moving forward. It was a year where the board had to work extra hard on filling a vacancy at the director level. I personally am grateful for their work on that, and just wanted to give them a shout out for that work. So our board consists of 13 member representatives. You see them listed here, and I know many of them are on the call today. Their voices and wisdom help us stay focused on our member needs. And I would like to personally thank each and every one of them for their extra dose of support during this year of transition. We simply could not do our work without their help. So thank you. And here are the faces of your WiLS staff. Many of them will introduce themselves throughout today's meeting, so I will not introduce each and every one of them right now, but I would like to point out some of our newest faces as well as those working behind the scenes today. I suppose I should take a moment though to introduce myself, seeing as I am one of the newer faces. As many of you know, I started with WiLS about 9 months ago after spending 20 years in various Wisconsin libraries. As director, I get the unique pleasure of intersecting with all aspects of WiLS work. And I can tell you, it is varied and fascinating, the variety of work that our organization is involved with. Working on behalf of all our members and with this amazing staff really is a dream come true for me. So I can honestly say, I don't think I've ever worked with a friendlier, more productive, or higher caliber staff, and I'm so honored to be working alongside them. 2020 brought on 3 new additional staff members. Kim Keysweater, our data analyst. She started right at the time of the member meeting last year and was introduced, but I think she had been here a mere moment or two at that meeting. You'll be hearing from her later on the data services that she helps spearhead with our consulting team. Also new to our consulting team is Laura Damon-Moore, who brings her passion for community engagement and programming to round out our consulting team's expertise as our newest community liaison. Laura will be sharing an update later or soon from our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiative. Kristen Whitson joined our digital projects team in the fall to assist with a 1-year grant-funded initiative called Building a Wisconsin Digital Readiness Community of Practice. She is leading a launch committee of archivists and other cultural heritage practitioners who together are designing a community-driven program to foster digital readiness in some of our smallest and under-resourced Wisconsin historical organizations. Also on the digital projects side of the house, many of you may recognize Erin Hughes, whom we are delighted to announce will be staying with WiLS for the next 3 years to help lead an NEH-funded grant project called Curating Indigenous Digital Collections. This will support Native communities' knowledge preservation and language revitalization. This work builds upon Erin's relationships and expertise as the Mukutu Midwest Hub Manager. Not pictured, but also on the digital projects team is a consultant we've been working with, Ellen Brooks. I want to thank her for her work on the IMLS funded opportunity called Curating Community Stories through a cohort mentor model. So we're happy to have her expertise. Then some of the, excuse me, some of the staff behind the scenes that I want to highlight. Rebecca, Sarah Burkholtz, and Lisa are the WiLS admin team powerhouse. Many of you probably know them from placing orders or dealing with billing questions. They are interwoven in all aspects of WiLS work, and we're incredibly lucky to have their talent on our staff. Many of you know Melody Clark. She's the magician behind it all right now, helping us through the slideshow and doing technical support. So I want to thank Melody for that. She's one of our community liaisons and consortium managers. And Tom Clement, you'll see pictured here, is our CFO, and he ensures that we are good stewards with our resources, with all of your resources, and providing good value for our members. So with that, we'll start on transitioning to our panel today. We know that 2020 asked a tremendous amount from libraries and from everyone. And we want to focus today's meeting on highlighting just a few instances across the state that showcase the innovative and caring ways in which our WiLS members have responded to their communities amidst great challenges. Today's panelists are just a few examples of the amazing work happening at libraries and cultural institutions, big and small. At WiLS, we have been in constant awe of your tenacity, creativity, and your honest to goodness hard work. So first I will be introducing Michael Doylan, Associate Vice Provost and Director of Libraries at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Michael is sharing with us the planning the UWM libraries have undergone this year to strengthen diversity, equity, and inclusion across all aspects of library operations. That planning work integrates work already underway and charts new directions across the libraries at all 3 of UWM's campuses. Michael?
Sure. Good morning, Jennifer. Can people hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer and Paul, for your opening comments and bringing us together and affirming us in a community at this virtual time. I'll be making some general comments about the process that we've undertaken at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee Libraries to further our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And because the format today doesn't permit any time for Q&A, I'd be glad to follow up with people by email. Like others across the country, I was horrified by the brutal killing of George Floyd by the Minneapolis Police Department in May of 2020, as well as by other highly visible images of racism and police brutality that were ricocheting around social media and news outlets at the time. Like others, I was doing a lot of soul searching at this time and asking how my response, especially as my response as the director of a large research library, might be channeled into positive change and what that would look like, both for me personally and in my professional life. My staff was experiencing similar reactions, and collectively we resolved to put together a plan to ensure that the UWM Libraries was doing its part to create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment for the UWM community, which of course includes the people who work in the libraries, as well as all of the people who we serve. The UWM Libraries support teaching, learning, and research at UWM. We consist of 3 libraries. There's the main library on the Milwaukee campus, and there's branch libraries at Waukesha and Washington County. Our current student body is 25,000 individuals, and UWM is known as both a top-tier research institution and as an access institution, which means that we try to open doors for people from a wide variety of backgrounds to access higher education opportunities. DEI has always been a strong part of our values in the UWM libraries, and it's regularly expressed through our public programs, our exhibits, and our outreach efforts to specific parts of the student population. However, these efforts, as I was observing reflecting about, have tended to rely on the efforts of a few dedicated individuals, and I think it's fair to say a lot of us in the libraries were taking those efforts for granted on a regular basis and letting other people carry the load. As director, I saw an opportunity for us to do more and to do better. We needed to ensure that these values are hardwired into our organization, not reliant on the talents and enthusiasm of a few individuals, and certainly not approached as an afterthought or as an add-on to our activities. So I charged a group of library staff members to examine what we were already doing to support DEI and to make recommendations along 2 lines. I asked them to let me know how we could be more intentional and deliberate in our activities, and secondly, how we could expand those activities and lay the foundation for future actions. This group worked on their charge diligently for many months, and the core group of, I think, 6 individuals eventually expanded to include almost 1/3 of the entire library staff who stepped up and said, I want to be a part of this initiative too. I want to participate in this and make a contribution. So I think that's a testament to our strong commitment to this already in the UWM libraries. As director, I focused my energy on supporting their ideas and encouraging them to think big. I tried to keep their perspective on the horizon, not on the weeds, and my job was really to open a path for them to move forward. On the slide, you can see the 4 main areas that we have identified. These are goals that high-level goals that we've set for our plan regarding the recruitment and retention of a diverse library staff, looking at how we can enhance our collections, services, and programs, how we can support the professional development of our library staff and help them build cultural competencies around DEI work, and how we can ensure that all of our spaces, both online and on site, are radically welcoming and inclusive. Beneath each goal, there's 16 separate initiatives and 30 different action items. So I think we have a very solid outcome here and have devised a framework that will serve the library well in future years. My next steps are to take this around to the provost, to the University Libraries Committee, and to get their input. And then we will be working together to identify different priorities among all those action items and initiatives, things that we can undertake and accomplish in 2021. My final thought here, and then I'll wrap up, is that every moment presents an ideal opportunity for libraries to reflect on their commitments to DEI and to ask how they can do more, where they can improve. As Paul said earlier, libraries don't stand still. The urgency of this work has not lessened since the summer of 2020. In fact, after seeing the insurrection at the US Capitol in January, led and spurred on by the white supremacist, racist ideology, sometimes expressed by those given some of the highest offices in this country, the need is even more present. So at the libraries, we will continue to ask how we can do more and how we can do better. Thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Michael, so much for sharing that, that framework and those powerful words. Resonating with me is making your values hardwired. I really appreciate that sentiment. Next, we have Shweta Hetzler from the Sun Prairie Public Library, director of the Sun Prairie Library, who will be sharing their new racial literacy plan and the action steps her staff and the library board have put in place. Shweta?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And it was great to hear Michael and what they're doing at the University Milwaukee. And I feel like we have a lot in common in what we're doing. So you can go to the next slide. Yes. So like many of you, when last spring hit, we were really focused obviously on COVID and how we were going to provide library services while being physically closed. And then as we started to, maybe some of us started to reopen in some capacity, you know, we were just really focused on COVID and health measures and public health measures. But as Michael said, after the killing of George Floyd, it really gave us all a lot to think about. And you know, obviously there had been police killings like these in the past, but because of our daily lives, we kind of could put it away and keep going. But with the pandemic, I felt like we were all really sitting with it and sitting with the effects of watching that brutal killing and what that really meant. And PLA put out a charge for all public libraries to take action and take action specifically in anti-racism. And I wanted to really dig in and know what that would look like at our library. And Sun Prairie is, you know, a fast-growing municipality just outside of Dane County, and the demographics are shifting, but it still is predominantly white. 75% of the population is white, and the rest of the population comprises African-American residents, Asian, Hispanic, multiracial, and less than 1% Native. So that's something to think about too. Is your library really reflecting the population? So you can go to the next slide. So I thought we really needed to develop a plan of action, and a plan of action to really work on racial literacy. And we decided to go with the idea of developing racial literacy, because libraries are always looking at ways to develop literacy from its, traditional sense of reading, being able to read and early literacy, but then, in the more recent past, financial literacy, health literacy have been big topics, but racial literacy has not really been something in the sphere. I think it's something that we've been pretty complicit about, and I thought we could be very intentional about it in our regular practices, so really embedding it in. And in 2020, we had so many opportunities for professional and staff development since we weren't open in the same way. So my staff and I really dug into many opportunities. And in Dane County, we have a great opportunity through the Ripple Project. So we've been taking a lot of advantage of learning through that process. And then other opportunities through ALA, PLA, Library Journal have given us a lot of chances to learn internally. And then, of course, looking at our policies and procedures, we've been fine-free for a few years, so that was something that we had in place. But then looking at our own practices, and one thing that we've been looking at is our relationship with the police. And when we call the police, so looking at those incident reports and really actually taking a look in the mirror as to when we are calling the police, and how we can do better, because I really believe we can do better there. Programming, so what programs are we offering? Who's coming to these programs? Who's offering these programs? Collection development, doing an audit of our collection. Does our collection really reflect our community and our community needs? Because one thing that's come up in collection development, well, if you have a community that's 80% white of, European ancestries, does that mean your collection needs to look like that? And it's been interesting conversationally to have these discussions, because your collection, just like your programs, represent trends and interests. So, I've been looking more at the collection, maybe needing to reflect more of the trends in national demographics and maybe even globally. So that's something that we're taking a look at. And lastly, and maybe even most importantly, representation. So who's serving on our boards, who's working at the library. And, some of this have a lot of these issues are things that I've been thinking about for many, many years, probably my entire life, but it's something that I always kind of have held pretty personally and just within my close sphere, because being a person of color, being an immigrant myself, and having faced some of the challenges, barriers, obstacles, seeing, racism affect my own family. It's been something that I don't necessarily talk about in my professional life. So it's been a little odd and maybe even slightly traumatic to bring it into the workplace for me. So I'm personally working through that. So I just wanted to put that out there, that there's probably a lot of self-care that needs to happen for all of us during this time where we're thinking and reflecting a lot. But yes, you can go ahead to the next slide. One of the things that we were really proud to be able to launch right away was through the racial literacy plan was public programming. And we started in the fall, September, with a new book club, Urban Sun Black Voices Book Club. And we have 2 women from Sun Prairie that are facilitating these book clubs. They're both African-American women that have lived in the community for some time, but haven't had this opportunity. So it's really great to have them here, pay them an honorarium, and have these book discussions facilitate discussions about race and what that means in our community. And our youth services department has also been working on programming. So these were the 4 books that we launched with, and then actually this Sunday we had another book club meeting, and we're going to be reading and discussing the new Jim Crow. So some pretty heavy books. So we're going to try to balance it with some lighter stuff too, just to keep it well balanced and keep people coming and interested. And we're taking surveys. So we're really excited about this program, and we've got funding to keep this going for an entire year through our library's foundation. So and you can go to the next slide. The book club and our racial literacy plan has gotten really great national and regional attention, and NBC 15 was at our book club in November, and they did a really nice spot segment on what the book club actually means for the participants. So it's been really great to hear these diverse voices in our community. And we're using this time to also develop book club kits, not just for the Black Voices and Black Lives Book Club, but through a grant to the University of Wisconsin. We're working on East Asia book club kits, again, to help work towards these anti-racist efforts that affect so many groups in our community. Yeah, and then the last slide, this plan of action was endorsed by our library board back in August. And the library board itself has been very impressive in their commitment. They took part in a 6-week anti-bias training. And through those efforts, they just adopted changes to the bylaws that will allow for 2 student ex officios to hopefully get more diverse voices. And they also will be forming a standing committee, a diversity, equity, and inclusion standing committee, and they will be actually looking for non-board members to also serve on that committee to hopefully get more diversity and representation, and maybe even serve as a bit of a pipeline into the library board to continue to develop a diverse and engaged board. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Shweta, thank you so much. Talk about incredibly impressive. Really interesting to see the 2 aspects of a university and now a public library and how you're addressing this topic. So thank you for sharing. We know this year has been incredibly challenging for our K-12 colleagues as well, with digital learning and all the changes back and forth that's been happening there. This morning we have Paula Norman with us from Library Media Instructional Technology Coordinator from Tomahawk School District, who will be sharing the creative approach she and her colleagues took to offer a new COVID-friendly opportunity for her students. Paula is also, this project was one of our current year's Idea to Action grant recipients. So WiLS is really honored and thrilled for the small part we were able to play in helping get this project off the ground. And so I will let Paula explain their new esports club. Paula?
Well, good morning. And you said that like you're honored getting it off the ground. I was just talking to my husband today as I was getting ready for this. And I said, a year ago, this was not even on the radar as far as esports. I didn't even know what the heck esports was a year ago. And then, yeah, here we are today. So when I wrote the grant, I called it Making Connections One Game at a Time, simply because the whole premise of my grant, from being in elementary school and having a lot of these students, and then my husband teaches in the high school, and now as the librarian, I noticed and still felt like there's a population of kids that are left out. And I remember, and I still want to fit in. So I remember what it was like being a high schooler and wanting a place to go and somewhere to fit in. And I saw a lot of kids that I reconnected with this last year in this position, that are smart enough kids that are just unmotivated and just were looking for somewhere to fit in. So I guess that's the approach I took, because at the school library level, it is not, you just mentioned trends in the last presentation. It is not just come in and check out books anymore. It is about making connections with students. It's being like a hub of a learning activity. At one time, computers were all based in the libraries, and that was kind of like a big learning lab. That's not the case so much anymore with one-to-one devices. But the whole 21st century skills that the schools have to focus on, of communication, collaboration, connection, rings huge in the library world. So that is kind of where my focus was for making the grants. So if you go to the next slide, I just want to point out, so WiLS kickstarted this. To be honest, I kind of wrote the grants and on a whim, and never ever expecting to get any money, because truthfully, I figured you'd say, what the heck does video gaming have to do with the library world? But it is all about the communication and collaboration. So that got us 3 computer systems, which was fine, because I had no idea how many kids were going to show up. So when we found out in August that we got the grant, and then of course we got back to school, so I had to give the kids a little time to settle in September. We had our first meeting and a survey, and I had 18 kids interested. And I'm like, okay, 3 computers, 18 kids, what are we going to do? And in order to accept the grant, if you go to the next slide, kind of with our timeline. So can you switch to the next slide? Thanks. We had applied for club status before we could even accept it. And then in order to get club status, we're on tier 1 or whatever, for 2 years. We had to write bylaws, set a code of conduct, elect officers, and basically anybody I could get to help me, we are donating our time for free for the next 2 years, until hopefully we will be funded by the school district. So that's kind of what September, October was, and getting an interest level. So after having like 18 kids show up, I realized, like, oh boy, in order to keep high school, and mostly boys, we do have 1 girl, and then 1, when I said about belonging, I do have 1 transgender student, which when I look at him, her, where else would he fit in the school? And he was just recently selected as like student of the month. And one of the big things was his connection to this esports after school club, and actually finding some friends. So I guess that's the biggest win I can say, getting ahead of myself. So after 18 kids, I realized we needed more grants. So I wrote and rewrote and pleaded to the Tomahawk community, which is pretty small. It's only 3,500 people. But between November and December, we were able to get enough money from those organizations, and along with our fundraiser, then to buy 7 more computers, so that we have 10. The last 5 computers just came in. So we've been operating on 5 computers with roughly about 10 kids are pretty committed, coming on days when we don't have school, days coming that is not even their night to practice. So that just shows you, like, they've never had any place to go before. Like I said, I had kids coming in on a non-school day, which these are typically not kids you're going to see after school. So we are just starting to compete, and it's been very frustrating. I'm not going to lie. We've had a lot of computer issues, and a lot of a lot of difficulties in that. But I never thought in August, when I got the grant, that we would be participating in a season already. If you go to the next slide, please. Like I said, the whole reason I started this club In Tomahawk, all there is athletics or fine arts. So if you don't fit either of those dynamics, there is nowhere to go for you with being a small town. And I just knew they needed a place, especially during this pandemic, to collaborate and become teams. Statistics show that 40% of students involved in esports have never participated in after-school activities. I would say more than that for my guys. I have 2 or 3 out of my 14 or 15 that do something else, but for the most part, these kids have never stayed after school for anything. One of the struggles we've had was at the very beginning, communication. These kids were never responsible. They did not know how to communicate to say, hey, I'm not going to be at practice tonight. So Discord is a server or a communication tool that gamers use, which I knew nothing about until a couple months ago. It's amazing to see the conversation, and I guess that just goes back to the whole goal for readiness with the communication and collaboration. Hey, I need a ride tonight. Can anybody give me a ride? Sure, I'll pick you up. Where do you live? A big article was written about us in the newspaper. One of the students, it was his day to learn from home, and he posted on the server, like, look at this amazing write-up about us. And he was so excited. And then we've had 2 scrimmages, and just the talking back and forth, between different team members, because there's 2 different games. So one night, one game plays, and one night the other game plays, and just the dialogue and communication happening between the different gamers, and learning to check in and communicate with each other. And I don't know, it's just been amazing. Yeah, that's been huge, I guess. And I would guess, based on just if you could see the Discord stuff and the excitement, like we lost the other night, but they were like, but look at how much we improved, and oh my goodness, like look at your kill ratio went up, like you improved so much from last week. Just the excitement and dialogue in the room too is pretty exciting. And I guess not only the communication and part. The other frustrating thing has been grades. These, again, are kids who've never really had to be accountable for their grades. Like, they're smart kids, but D's and F's, who cares, big deal. So by this, their attendance, they have to be at school. And part of our code of conduct is that if you want to participate, there are no F's. You have to maintain D's or better. So kids that are struggling, we've been doing one of the other guys that helps me out while we have a group of kids gaming, because we don't have enough computers. The other ones we're checking in on their grades, checking in and saying, do you have study habits? What can I help you with? Do you have an organizer, getting them organized, so that this remote learning's been hard on them. So a lot of them don't know how to dig themselves out when they get behind. So making like a checklist, like tonight I'm going to work on this, tomorrow I'm going to focus on this, and teaching them some tools to help them get organized, because generally these kids are not the most organized. So that has also been, I guess, something I never really thought I had to teach them. So we talk about grades, the importance of getting homework done, organization, and then the other part is getting sleep, because a lot of them don't like to sleep at night. They like to game, and how important it is to have sleep and proper nutrition. So yeah, while video gaming was kind of the premise of it, I think the rewards are just more than that. It's been, I don't know, it's just been amazing. And if you go to the last slide, they say those who start e-programs, it's possible for one person to get the program off the ground. And so for me, it was me writing the grant, but it certainly isn't, I can't do it alone. So it's been amazing to have support from our community. It's been overwhelming. You know, we have teachers walking by and seeing the excitement and checking in. We have 7th and 8th graders saying, how do I get involved in esports when I get in high school? There's just a big excitement. And I'll end with, we left the other night, we were practicing, and one of the middle school teachers came in and said, oh, look at you guys. I haven't seen you forever. I miss you guys. And some of my students said, are you talking about us? And she's like, well, yeah, you guys are great kids. And they said, no one's ever said that about us. So, and then one of my other students, and he is a straight A student and involved in other things at school, but he just said to me last week when we were all kind of down because we lost our first match and things technology wise weren't going the best. He goes, Mrs. Norman, thank you for doing this for us. Like, I never thought we would have this opportunity at our little school. So thank you for bringing this. And that's all I have. And there's no one way to do this. I mean, I did this by the seat of my pants. I am not a gamer. I don't have a clue. Basically, I am there to make sure they don't get in trouble at night because they take over from there and they talk their own language and I do not understand a word.
Paula, thank you so much. I'm thinking of the Margaret Mead quote, which I won't get right here, but if you think that one person can't change the world, indeed, it's the only thing that ever has, right? I'm in awe, and I think I probably will speak for many people listening in. The work you've done and the focus on the whole student is really quite incredible. Thanks so much for sharing that with us.
You are welcome. Thank you for the grants because it wouldn't have been possible without you starting it. I kind of got my hand slapped after, like I asked for forgiveness after the fact. I just went ahead and did it. And I know if I would have asked for permission first, we wouldn't be where we're at. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Angie Bodeslaw from the Spooner Memorial Library. She is the director there. In March of 2020, like many of us on the call, right, things were shut down due to COVID-19 and their building was really closed and not able to do any sort of in-person services. So feeling helpless and wanting to serve the community, Angie and her staff partnered with a handful of local organizations to serve Washburn County during this shelter-at-home period. I think what I'll do in the interest of time is I'm just going to turn things over to Angie to explain the ways in which they kind of turned their library building into a first response care package distribution center across their county. So Angie, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. You can go to the next slide, please. So March 2020, the libraries were literally shut down. The only option to use our library was for COVID response. And so of course, we did some COVID response. So we had an empty building, but a community in need. So what came out of that need was a group of individuals. I think there were maybe 6 of us on the first call. We got together and we said, we have to do something. What can we do? At that point, you know, the toilet paper, there was a shortage of toilet paper and cleaning supplies and all these things. And people were having a hard time mentally, you know, as they still are. But we decided that we were going to write a grant, Marshfield Clinic, and make some care packages. So we received a $10,000 grant through Marshfield Clinic, and we purchased items locally to be able to support the businesses. And we used the library as the packaging center and parking lot outside as one of the distribution centers across Washburn County. Pictured here, you'll see on the bottom left, there's some of the packages that we created on. You'll see a stack of toilet paper over there. We had in there hygiene items, cleaning products. We had some recreational items like some movies and Legos and things that we purchased from a store locally. some games that we purchased from the local bookstore to support them. And all in all, to this date, we have distributed about 920 care packages. Over on the top and on the right is 2 different locations where we had a distribution site. People drove up, we put a care package in their trunk, and they drove away. We did that at 4 different locations in our county, because our county's pretty spread out and rural. It went really well. We had quite a few different locations and then distributions. And now we continue to give out care packages on an as needed basis from 4 different locations. The library houses the majority of them. Could go to the next slide, please. So from the care packages, it only continued. We went from care packages to deciding, you know, there's a lot of people that are hungry in our community, and there's a lot of restaurants that are forced to close. So what can we do? So we raised money through a fundraiser called Outrun the Virus, where an individual on our team ran for I forget how many hours straight to raise funds. All in all, we raised about, I think, 43,500 total, 14,500 coming from a bank that's local, and we were able to offer supplemental meals for families in the area. We collected our first, or I guess our second group of volunteers, because we had volunteers for care packages, and they the volunteers would go to local business or local restaurants, collect all the meals, and then bring them to different families again across the county. So pictured here is our latest endeavor, which is the Farmers to Families food box distribution. Some of you may be familiar with the program. It's a USDA program where you can go back. Thanks. It's a USDA program where the federal government purchases food from farmers and from processors, and then people put these boxes together and then bring them to different communities for distribution. We had our last distribution actually Wednesday, and that picture on the top right corner, that is a picture of the boxes before we got started with some members of the FFA club who have helped at multiple distributions. So Community First, which is a name that we gave ourselves, takes the lead on finding volunteers for these endeavors, and a lot of us are there, like me in my spiky hair wig that people just loved when they drove through. As you can see on the top left, we had line after line, and every time we distributed all the boxes and saw that there was a great need in the community. On Wednesday, we distributed over 1,200 boxes. On the bottom right, you'll see a man with his trunk open. He is volunteering to bring bulk distributions to seniors in the community and people that can't get in. So we had several organizations partner with us on that: Faith in Action, Meals on Wheels, and the ADRC all partnered on that. The most awesome thing that has come from this collaboration is really showing the impact that the library can have on the community, and also realizing how amazing some partnerships with the county can be. Could you please go to the next slide? So here are just some of our numbers, although they have changed since here. This was before our last distribution. So with our Farmers to Families food box program, we have distributed, well, after yesterday, over 7,000 boxes with a fiscal impact of $272,000 on the community, and 47 volunteers for that first group. Yesterday we had a volunteer force of over 30 people, and they come back, and they come back every time. We're going to have our next one March 10th, and we already have I announced it yesterday and we already have 10 volunteers signed up for that. We've been able to gain community support through donations and through volunteers. We've distributed now over 900 care packages. We were able to offer 1,400 supplemental meals, and we're able to impact over 23 local businesses, helping with the economy during this difficult time. Community First started out of the pandemic, and it is going to continue after the pandemic. The library has taken the charge in incorporating Community First. We are working on our 501(c) and gaining board members. We are just beginning, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and awesome to be, one of the leaders in it, and show people that the library is more than the building, and the library is more than books. You could go to the next slide, please. So another opportunity that we had this summer was trying to figure out how to have our family festival, which is a huge event in the county, safely. So we worked together with, we collaborated with the Mental Health Task Force and our Family Resource Center and a coalition prevention to make the Family Fest a drive-through experience. So what we did was we came up with a theme, let's talk about it. And in each of these bags that you see here, which there were 400 bags that we put together, there's a canvas with some paint to make a family craft, a handprint craft. There's information on the Small Talks campaign, which if you haven't heard of it, you should look into. It's how to bring up hard topics about drugs and alcohol with your kids. And then we had some taco recipes and taco seasonings, and some other fun things in there as well. We then again made sure that we represented all of Washburn County by offering 4 distribution centers, the library being one of them. And then finally, the bags that we had remaining, we gave to the school to distribute to their first graders. It was this whole last year has been opportunity after opportunity to shine as a library, and going beyond what people might think a library is. It's been a great experience. Community First, I think, was the best thing that came out of the pandemic, and I am so excited to see where we go from here. Yeah, for sure. We've got 2 more food box distributions coming up. I know that. But anyway, thanks for asking me to come speak today. And I'm really excited to hear what you guys all have been doing too.
Wow, Angie, just wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's incredibly impressive. And at WiLS, we are in favor of anything that involves tacos. So nice job. $43,000 raised. That is just, yeah, phenomenal leadership. I just saw pop up in the chat, and that's a great way to describe that. So our final speaker from our member panelists is Xander Miller. Xander Miller is the Digital Strategies Librarian at Kenosha Public Library. And we all know and have had the Kenosha community on our minds and in our hearts with all the incredible stress over the past year. And we know that you're a community in the midst of hurting and healing. Xander will share how the library had begun engaging the community in early 2020, and then following the shooting of Jacob Blake, how the library, and particularly Xander and the Uptown branch, responded to the shooting and unrest in the community. Xander?
All right, so this will be as much a personal story as it is a library story. So Kenosha we'd joined a cohort early on in 2020 for Wisconsin Libraries Transforming Communities. And we've been working with community partners to help with community engagement and learning what needs in the community are. Then we got hit by a pandemic. George Floyd incidents, the incident with George Floyd being killed by police happened. And we've started with that a lot more equity, diversity, inclusion efforts. I'd actually been in the middle of completing our inclusive services assessment when August 23rd and Jacob Blake was shot by police. And so, I hear about that news that night, and I'm just kind of, really, really numb at that point. We'd had the Uptown and Simmons branches. Those are in downtown Kenosha and uptown Kenosha, respectively. They were closed for Monday, and I work at the Southwest branch, which was open. We didn't know how long we'd be open. There wasn't a curfew set immediately. We had closed those branches, and so I went in to work on that Monday, and all I worked on that day was just the inclusive services assessment, because my mind was going, what can I do? What can I do to try to support? And one of the things that we talk about with Wisconsin Libraries Transforming Communities is our spheres of influence. And right then there, my sphere of influence was, completing this assessment. Let's see what we can do, how we can support equity and diversity right now. And so I get Barb emails us, because she's been emailing us. Barb's our library director, on the status of Uptown and Simmons and how difficult it is to close buildings in the middle of a pandemic. Uptown and Simmons had been open limited hours to the public at this point. We were actually closing off service that we had been offering previously. That's a difficult decision. Staff safety is just as important. People live there, people had to go there, and there's still a lot of unrest. And so that Monday, after I'd gone home, I'm still thinking what I want to do. And that night, I'm thinking of what my sphere of influence is, because this wasn't my first rodeo with the shooting of Black people by police and leading to protests. But it was the first time I could have some influence and do something within somewhere. So I had come in on Tuesday, and I approached my direct supervisor first on what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to open Uptown, the Uptown Library. It only needs 2 people to actually be open. And my direct supervisor suggested I talk to our library director. So I did that. I sat in a room and talked with Barb on that. I felt like opening that service of having the building there, because it's really hot. It's late August. It's hot. People need some place if they to rest that could be regular, could be normal. And not only did she say, sure, yes, she also said, I'll go with you, which means a lot, because we're at Southwest just fine, but we can go over to Uptown, open the building, and it's can be. It ended up being me, Barb, and our communications guru, Brandy, who also went to open the building. So I want to give some context as well what Tuesday also ended up doing, because Tuesday that was when there were first fires on 22nd and 63rd Street. And so Kenosha is a grid, so keep this in mind. And then Uptown Library is about between 25th and 24th and 63rd Street. So literally 2.5 blocks down, we had fires that were caused during the unrest that were just the day before. Also, Tuesday night was when Kyle Rittenhouse had shot and killed two people during the unrest. And so Wednesday, was when Barb, we were still, you know, if there was still shooting, if there was still fire like right next door, we wouldn't go over for our safety. But Wednesday came and Barb let me know we're gonna go over there. So we drove down. We got there, opened the building, and we also brought in water bottles for the community if they need it. It's a hot day. And people came. Some people came, used the computers, because that's, for a lot of people, that was their only internet access or access to services. So having people come in and just using them was part of that limit of what we can do. And me and Brandy that day also contacted community partners who were in the area, either doing cleanup efforts or boarding efforts, and said, hey, we're open if you need a cleaning space, we have water. And middle of the day that day, this group from Chicago came up. It was Illinois or somewhere around Chicago, came up that were helping with cleaning efforts, and they dropped off a lot of food packages for people. They didn't know we were open. We hadn't communicated with them, but they knew we were a library, and they had come and said, hey, if people need it, they can have it. And it was not a small amount either. It was quite a large amount. And we reached out to our community partners again, said, hey, we now have food and snacks here. And that got usage as well. Some people had come in directly because they had heard about, hey, there's water, there's food at the library today. And so we had that. And not only were we then open that Wednesday, we got other managers, other librarians to also come in to help on Thursday and the Friday after too. So Uptown opened just 3 days after the shooting, literally a day after Rittenhouse had shot 2 others, and then fires that were 2 blocks away. And so I'd felt like that was a huge accomplishment for us, and as well as helping support the community in whatever way that we could. Even further supporting on that Friday, there's a call out for staff at the library in general if they wanted to help paint downtown, because all the boards were kind of depressing and empty for buildings. And something that we didn't really get to see a lot in the news was how the uptown and downtown areas were painted over those boards with inspirational words, pictures, things about coming together as a community. And the call out went that on paid time, staff could go down to the uptown area and help paint the area and make it brighter and have healing for the community. And so all of that combined just kind of showed a huge response from us to quickly reopen that building, to allowing staff to take time to help paint, help clean in the area, and then us being able to provide water, food, and just internet access, a cool building where there's some calm. All of that was part of our response. And for me, it just meant, I was able to act in my sphere of influence and support our community.
Thank you, Xander. Your leadership really, it sounds like without you stepping forward and being that leading voice, the story would look very different. So thank you so much for your leadership. And I really am struck by the story of the group from Illinois who knew that kind of universal understanding that libraries are places that help their communities. I'm so impressed with how you were there and so responsive. Thank you. So, I want to thank all of our members for sharing their stories. We know that these are just a few. We know that you all have your own versions of these stories that you share loudly or not so loudly in your own communities. And we want to thank you for what you've done this year to respond and reframe the ways in which you're serving your communities. We're all learning that 2020 lessons are ones that will forever reshape our practices and perspectives. So thank you for letting us learn alongside all of you. We really have at WiLS been learning and evolving right along with you. I want to turn things over to my fellow staff members. Oh wait, before I do that, I don't want to do that yet. I'm ahead on my script. We want to share back, Jeff Bruner is going to be letting us, sharing with us sort of a snapshot of what you all shared in the chat in the prompt that we put at the beginning of the meeting. So Jeff.
Hi folks, I'm Jeff Bruner here at WiLS, and I have the unenviable task of following that amazing panel, and in particular immediately following Xander, which I'm like goosebumpy at some of what he had to say, so thank you all so much. Some of the themes that came out of the messages that we had in chat actually mapped really well to the themes that we've seen from our panelists today. So a couple of things that we wanted to highlight: collaboration and partnerships. If we've learned anything this year, it has been reinforcing an idea that I know that every WiLS member and certainly every member of the WiLS staff agrees with, and that's that we're stronger together. Also, the creativity exhibited in tackling some unprecedented challenges, in particular, or among those being rapidly and successfully pivoting to online teaching, online learning, online working. That's been a theme among our members and really everyone. But also caring for ourselves and each other. There were a lot of mentions about personal and family accomplishments, losing weight, learning a new skill, getting a kid off to college. That's caring for ourselves and our immediate surrounding, but also caring for our colleagues, helping our coworkers stay engaged and sane during a really tumultuous and crazy time. And also caring for our community members as well. You know, certainly we saw mentions of that in chat. We've definitely seen that among our panelists' presentations as well. So, you know, I think if there's overall, if there's one like single unifying theme among the chat responses and among, which I also think ties into what our panelists had to say, it's that personal, professional, and political accomplishments are possible during a time like this, and that those kinds of accomplishments overlap and reinforce each other as well. None of the people attending here may know this, but WiLS, you know, we have our internal chat going during this presentation to kind of coordinate who's going to talk next and who's going to say what. Everyone in that chat has been blown away by what we've seen in the, from our panelists today as well. So kudos to everybody, and thanks for everyone attending and presenting.
Thanks so much, Jeff. And thanks for all of you who participated in the chat. So I'm going to turn things over now. We have a few WiLS updates. We want to let you know what we've been working on the last year and where we're heading going into 2021. I'm going to just kick the ball over to my colleague, Laura. She is going to be sharing the activities on our new internal EDI work group. Laura.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jennifer. And as Jennifer said, my name is Laura Damon Moore. I'm one of the newer WiLS staff members, having joined in July of 2020. So I'm here today to share an update about the ongoing work related to equity, diversity, and inclusion, which we'll refer to as EDI, that is happening at WiLS. So this work is driven by one of WiLS' core organizational values, which you can see here. While it's vital to state this commitment in writing, we wanted to make sure that a focus on this work is intentionally applied to all aspects of our organization, from our workplace culture to the services and resources we provide for members. Therefore, there has to be a multi-pronged and embedded approach that permeates all of our work, internally, externally, and personally for each staff member. So today, I'll be highlighting a few of the different prongs of that multi-pronged approach. Let's start with some work that's been happening internally within our organization itself. In order to make sure that there is time and staff dedicated to helping WiLS enact our values, an EDI work group was established in 2020 to promote staff engagement and to make sure that we are holding spaces for open dialogue internally as well as externally alongside our members. This group meets monthly and has a running list of ideas and action items that we work on. This group also provides updates and holds spaces for discussion at staff meetings and board meetings. One of the first activities the EDI work group undertook was to help the organization and each staff member utilize a two-way EDI lens to critically review current and new projects and work. Every staff member mapped out their current work activities and critically examined where there are EDI components, where there's room for intentional growth, and action items for how to work toward that growth. We incorporated an explicit EDI check-in to our annual staff reviews with Jennifer. And as staff are evaluating and prioritizing pro bono work projects, we know that EDI is a core and critical aspect of our work. So let's talk about how the EDI lens applies to our external or member-facing work. You can see this in our work with vendors. For example, working with Overdrive on accessible and inclusive design regarding the Libby e-reader app. This year brings a restructuring of the academic purchasing model to be more equitable and more aligned with a number of WiLS values. For many of our members, this will save them resources that can be put toward other important endeavors at their home institutions. We're currently conducting a short survey of member organizations in order to understand their EDI resource landscape and what they consider to be their EDI strengths and challenges to help inform where and how WiLS prioritizes future services, tools, and resources for members. There is more growth and work to do for WiLS as an organization as we examine our own practices and policies and in terms of how we serve and support our membership. And we intend to keep you informed about this as we continue to learn and grow in this area. Thank you all. And now I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Kim.
Thanks so much, Laura. I had to do the funky, am I unmuted moment? I have the opportunity to share with you all a research project related to the pandemic that we worked on this year. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm new to WiLS in the past year as a data analyst and have been learning and growing. Of course, during a pandemic, that's a fascinating time to do that. So when the pandemic hit in March 2020, WiLS had the opportunity to sort of pivot on a project and support our members through a DPI LSTA funded project. What had originally been designed to look into Overdrive and the Wisconsin's Big Read transitioned into a need to understand what was going on with digital collections during the pandemic with both WPLC's, the Wisconsin's Digital Library, as well as WSDLC as two unique statewide case studies. And probably slightly ironic / humorous news, we, AKA probably me, wrote the proposal as if the pandemic might be ending sometime in the summer of 2020. Needless to say, we dutifully analyzed data all the way through November 30th of 2020 when it became super clear that the project needed an actual end date, even if the pandemic didn't appear to be close to being over, hopefully maybe this year. The project took a mixed methods approach and it paired both quantitative and qualitative data to assess each consortium and its unique audience. So Wisconsin's Digital Library was analyzed on a number of metrics like monthly checkouts, holds, user data, which was complemented by the annual patron survey. The WSDLC's collection was analyzed on comparable metrics and situated with information gathered during interviews with selected school library staff and media specialists. This project highlighted, to use a very overused and very 2020 term, unprecedented growth for both WPLC's Wisconsin Digital Library and the WSDLC's digital collections on essentially every metric. The report really highlighted just one avenue of the many ways that libraries have continued to provide services to their communities during something totally unexpected like a pandemic that resulted in extensive business and facility closures that all of us had to grapple with. As captured in the working title for the report, thanks to inspiration from a conversation with Jen actually, libraries' physical doors may have been closed for some or much of 2020, but that did not mean that they were actually closed by any stretch of the imagination, which seems even sillier to say after hearing these panelists share these amazing, amazing stories of the work that you all have been engaged in over the last year. So some of the key findings from the report included checkout increases that were unprecedented. For WSDLC, for example, checkouts increased by 278% when comparing September of 2019 to September of 2020. New user enrollments increased dramatically, especially at the start of the pandemic for the WPLC's Wisconsin Digital Library, and in September with the start of school for the WSDLC. Patrons were more engaged with the collections during the pandemic, and that has persisted all the way through the end of the data collection period. People were checking out a higher number of items on average after the pandemic began in March 2020 when compared to previous usage rates. Unsurprisingly, holds did increase. However, some injection of funding from DPI helped a lot, and also selections made by staff of both consortium. Many new users to the WPLC's collection indicated that they joined because of COVID-19, 66% of them actually, and many of them indicated that they heard about the collection either from library staff or through word of mouth. And also, when we look longer term, many of these metrics peaked, in spring and summer of 2020 and came down a little bit, but have remained elevated all the way through the end of the data collection period, indicating the potential that this influx created a sustainable level of increased usage to the collections. So the report was actually just finalized last week with DPI, and it's going to be rolled out in the coming weeks. We're sharing first with the WPLC and WSDLC consortia, as well as internal DPI staff, followed by other key stakeholders. So be on the lookout for that report, which will be released, I think, to the general public very soon. With that, I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague, Vicki, to share a little bit about community development in virtual environments.
Thanks, Kim. Good morning. My name is Vicki Tobias, and I'm part of the digital projects team at WiLS. As you know, WiLS has existed as a virtual and officeless organization for some time, but COVID-19 altered the meeting landscape for most of our project partners and members. Last year, my colleague Andy Coffin and I took time to learn more about virtual engagement. We researched and developed some best practices for WiLS, some tips and tools for creating more and better engagement during our virtual meetings. We took advantage of our own staff meetings, used our colleagues as guinea pigs to test drive some of our new ideas, which other WiLSians have since adopted in their own meeting facilitation. Specifically, we've worked really hard to better understand Zoom as a platform, its features, how to use this platform effectively to create engagement in virtual meetings. So a few key ideas that guide our meeting planning and facilitation. We're doing everything that we can to help our meeting participants feel more comfortable and competent in this environment. We know it's new for many folks, or was new as of last year. We always aim for more and different engagement bursts or activities throughout a meeting by including different types of engagement and interactions. So using the breakout rooms when possible, using chat, maybe inviting folks to share their ideas in a shared Google Doc, using some of the polls or other built-in tools to sustain interest. And finally, as WiLSians, we invite lightness and humor whenever possible and appropriate. That's really important to us. Some challenges we continue to ponder: how to address Zoom fatigue. It's a real thing, especially as many of us and you are on Zoom all day. How to provide our meeting participants with an equitable experience on a virtual platform. How to continue getting work done while respecting that nothing about this past year or our current situation is normal and may not be for a while. So if you're interested in seeing the results of our work, some of our tips, tricks, best practices, lessons learned, take a look at our WiLS World Shorts presentation on virtual engagement from last fall, and I'll toss the link into the chat here in a moment. And with that, I am going to pass the baton to my colleague, Melissa.
Good morning. My name is Melissa McLymans, and I'm a service specialist community liaison, and I primarily work in our consulting area at WiLS. Much of our consulting work has relied on in-person meetings to build rapport and community. Kickoff meetings with strategic planning teams, staff soars, board conversations, these have all traditionally been in person. But obviously with COVID-19, we had to switch it all up and try to make a meaningful experience for the folks involved. And here are just a couple of examples of things we've done. So we're in the second year of a small library strategic planning cohort. And we had planned on some changes to decrease required travel, which we knew took directors away from their libraries for extended periods of time, which was hard for staffing and for budgets. But we did think that we would get to see each other in person at some point. With 6 libraries, each of 3 to 5 people on their planning team, we've turned to shorter, more frequent full cohort meetings that use a mixture of large group learning and small group applied work time. And we use Basecamp. So Basecamp is a project management and file sharing tool that also has a community engagement feature, something that we use. It's called Campfire. And we use that to ask the cohort fun questions that are not related to the strategic planning process at all, in hopes of building community, even when we're not in the same room. The virtual icebreakers, coupled with an intentional openness from myself and my cohort partner, Laura, has been successful in making the virtual cohort a friendly spot to learn from and with each other. We've also had to move interactive group meetings to the virtual world. So one example is facilitated SOARs, or strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results, which we normally do in a single room with small groups, sticky notes, and a lot of conversation. By sharing meeting norms at the front of the meeting, things like cameras on, mics off, it's okay to leave the meeting, and practicing the tools, things like changing your name, using emojis, using the chat, participants knew what to expect and how to participate, clearing up some of the meeting anxiety. And we use small group to large group shares, along with time for conversation to build engagement. And one of our top tricks is to be logged on early, and Laura and I chat away with each other at the start of these meetings. This sets the stage for an open and fun experience. So having a mixture of activity coupled with clear directions and explanations have gone a long way in building engagement in our virtual meetings. And I'll pass it on to Kristen.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm Kristen Whitson. I'm a program assistant on the Digital Readiness Community of Practice project with Recollection Wisconsin. And that's a project, excuse me, that was specifically aimed at creating community. The project was originally envisioned as an in-person community, but of course, we quickly shifted to being fully virtual due to the pandemic. The project is supervised by Vicki, who you just heard from, so we were fortunate to be the beneficiaries of the research that she and Andy had done on virtual engagement before our project even kicked off. So we meet with a group of local historians every month, and something we did before our first meeting, we sent out swag bags via postal mail to all of our meeting participants. And it was just a few things and some chocolate. It's a small gesture, but it really helped root our community in reality and not just behind a screen. Every month, as Vicki and Melissa both said, we're thoughtful and intentional about how we change engagement types and create connection. We set aside time before the meeting to hang out and chat, just as Melissa and Laura do. And just like you would if you were arriving to an in-person meeting a few minutes early. We change up engagement types, as Vicki said. We also try to build in some times of silent thought for meeting participants to turn off their screen, ponder and think, maybe move around, and come back with ideas or contributions. These are really small acts of connection, but they all add up to feeling like a cohesive, productive, and collaborative group, and it's working. Our group remains highly engaged and participative month after month. So with that, I'll pass this on to Sarah Gold to talk about vendor negotiations.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm Sarah Gold. I'm a community liaison for WiLS, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to
work in consortium management for the WPLC and the Wisconsin Schools Digital Library Consortium, as well as the Cooperative Purchasing Program, which I'm pleased to talk about today. So as many people have mentioned, 2020 presented challenges to our members and vendors in so many ways, but through these challenges, WiLS was able to explore ways to increase accessibility to electronic resources through free and extended access, reducing or eliminating annual price increases, and working with members to help administer CARES Act funding. Cooperative purchasing teams work to increase accessibility to resources began immediately in mid-March as WiLS reached out to vendor partners to make sure member libraries had everything that they needed to provide remote access for student and patrons when schools and colleges pivoted to virtual learning and public libraries closed to the public. One example of a resource that had a significant shift in its access model is Ancestry.com, which has traditionally been a resource available for use in public libraries only. ProQuest has extended the use of this resource to patrons from home for close to a year. And then in addition, our vendor partners generously shared links to resources they were allowing non-subscribers access to across all of our member types. Another thing that we were proud of was that communication with our member libraries was critical in figuring out where the access pain points were for them and to discover what sorts of new resources and tools the libraries needed in their new operating environments. For example, with public libraries shifting to curbside services, scheduling software became an urgent need. Digital books for students were identified as essential as school library books in print became unavailable. And then as 2020 continued, our members began to inform the cooperative purchasing team both of budget cuts and in some cases funding from additional common school funding and CARES Act funding became available. WiLS was able to work with vendor partners to hold renewal pricing flat for the majority of our resources and to be able to help members allocate additional funding quickly and efficiently. One of the most significant renegotiations for renewal pricing was with the academic journal publisher Springer Nature. Springer has historically been a vendor who sets renewal increases significantly above the WiLS designated acceptable increase of 4%. In 2020, the increase was initially set at 6%, and WiLS was able to successfully renegotiate the price increase down to 3.75%. And then finally, the taco comes up again. The popular Taco Tuesday webinar series that brings our vendor partners to our members in 15-minute presentations on the first Tuesday of each month continued to be a source of connection and community for our members and vendors in a time of isolation. So now I'll turn it over to Emily Fotenhauer, who will be talking about Recollection Wisconsin. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. I'm here to share with you today a little bit about how Recollection Wisconsin, which is one of the consortia managed by WiLS, has responded to the challenges and opportunities of the past year. And as many of you know, Recollection Wisconsin is a statewide collaborative to support online sharing of historical resources from Wisconsin libraries, as well as archives, museums, and historical societies. For the past 2 years, we've been grateful to receive WISE Learn funds through the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. Unfortunately, as all state agencies were faced with major budget cuts in the summer of 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic, that also impacted the WISE Learn budget and thus our Recollection Wisconsin operating budget for the current year. But this fall, we were able to quickly put together a plan to weather this reduction in revenue. We put some major projects on pause, such as moving towards adopting standardized rights statements for resources in the collection. But we also found ways to make our reduced project management time more predictable and more efficient. One of the big changes we made was in how we provide guidance and support to our content partners. We do a lot of kind of on-demand and one-on-one support, which is great, but can also be time-consuming and unpredictable. So we started some regular office hours for these consulting conversations. Those are facilitated by Vicki Tobias. So every month, folks can sign up to have a conversation with her in a more of a scheduled and structured environment. We've also been investing some of our time in reviewing and cleaning up our documentation, so existing guidelines and other things, so that our partners can more easily find the information that they need on their own. In addition, we were able to recover some of our lost revenue thanks to the Wisconsin Department of Administration's COVID-19 Cultural Organization Grant Program. This is some funds designated from the Federal CARES Act to assist cultural organizations in Wisconsin whose operations were impacted by COVID-19. And that award helped us further stretch our reduced project management budget. An exciting and unexpected positive change we saw in the past year was a really significant increase in the use of the Recollection Wisconsin web portal. Overall views of collection items more than doubled in 2020. And we don't have a lot of data on the reasons for this growth, but we've assumed that a lot of it is due to the pivot to virtual learning in schools as a result of the pandemic. So we're working on building on that momentum and that increased use by upping our efforts to get collection materials into the hands and classrooms of educators. Andy Coffin has led the work to establish an education advisory committee that includes representatives from the Madison and Milwaukee Public Schools, Wisconsin Historical Society, DPI, and PBS Wisconsin Education. And we're harnessing this committee's expertise along with support from an iSchool practicum student, Ronya Zweifel, to begin creating content guides that help K-12 educators find and use the primary sources in Recollection Wisconsin. And finally, I wanted to share some of the steps that we are taking to put into practice our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. In September 2019, so before the challenges of 2020, the Recollection Wisconsin Governing Board and Steering Committee set a priority to systematically develop the shared collection to foster diversity and inclusion with the goal that more Wisconsin residents can see their stories represented in our digital collections. And to work towards this goal in 2020, we conducted a gap analysis to understand current collection coverage and also identify some opportunities for growth and new partnerships that can be developed in different parts of the state. We're also participating in these important conversations that are happening on the national level with digital libraries and archives across the country through our partnership with the Digital Public Library of America. In summer 2020, the DPLA Network Council, that's the representative body for DPLA members, collaboratively developed an inclusion, diversity, equity, access, and social justice statement, or IDEAS statement. And the work to draft and adopt this IDEAS statement was led by then Network Council Chair Ann Hanlon. She's a Wisconsinite. She's the head of digital collections and initiatives at UW-Milwaukee, as well as a member of the Recollection Wisconsin Governing Board. And the IDEAS statement asserts that as a national network of digital libraries and archives, and I'm going to read a quote from the statement, we are in a unique position to see and reflect on the historical homogeneity of our collections and to recognize and act on the need for diversity, representativeness, and respect in how we conduct the work of documenting and providing access to our shared history. And I'll hand it now over to Andy Coffin.
Thank you, Emily. Hi, everybody, and thanks for staying with us so far. I promise you we are almost nearly done. I'm Andy Coffin. I'm one of WiLS community liaisons. And at WiLS, we have a team of 3 people, Melody Clark, Jen Chamberlain, and myself, who form the staff development group. Our work is to work individually with staff members to identify and resolve work challenges together. Sometimes those are individual challenges, but more often than not, they are challenges that multiple WiLS staffers are facing. So the team can get together and strategize the most effective way to tackle those challenges, whether it's just brainstorming and information sharing, all the way to making business decisions to enroll in a group benefit program and help our staff afford health insurance and have access to a retirement fund. So while we've always been an officeless organization, when the pandemic closed schools last year and took away many of the things we all rely on in our personal lives to recharge us. Time with friends and family, traveling, trips to the gym, so on. We wanted to do what we could to help our staff adjust. So just like your staff and colleagues, some of us have children at home. Some of us or we share homes with folks who have conditions that put them at high risk. And all of us have struggled in one way or another to come to terms with the sacrifices that we needed to make to control the spread of COVID and to support public health. So for us, a few of those changes are listed here. One thing we did was to shorten our full-time work week to 30 hours. As the pandemic caused our personal lives and our work lives to always be happening at the same time, this helped give staff permission to see to those personal things without having to worry about meeting that 40-hour work week and like working late into evenings or weekends. We wanted to support staff need to still continue to connect with friends and family and with one another. So in order to help staff stay connected when they couldn't see people they love in person, we allowed staff to use our business Zoom accounts on weekends and after hours for virtual personal or family get-togethers, book clubs and such. We've also created space for staffers to connect with each other on a personal level, hosting some virtual happy hours. We created a Slack channel for sharing recipes, workout videos, and so on. In July, we held a staff retreat that focused on staff well-being. We hired a facilitator who specializes in helping organizations invest in their staff and maximize their staff's capabilities. Instead of what we have typically done at that retreat, which is to focus kind of exclusively on the organization and our goals, instead of that, we focused on kind of naming and identifying our sort of unique strengths among the staff on the team. And finally, in the early stages of the Safer at Home order, we encourage staff to be very thoughtful with their colleagues, but as well as with members about how and when they communicate. Only communicating when absolutely necessary, being forgiving of blown deadlines and meeting cancellations and last minute changes, and generally allowing one another grace and space to adjust to this new rhythm of life and quarantine. Encouraging staff to take care of one another and take care of themselves. So basically putting people first and all other things afterwards. I'm going to pitch the ball back to Jen to talk about some of our upcoming initiatives.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everyone. Boy, holy cats, if that's what WiLS can do in a pandemic year, I can't wait to see what this year is going to bring. So looking on the horizon for 2021, our recent board approved strategic initiatives are intensely member focused and tightly aligned with our mission. And you see the primary categories referenced here. I'm going to put a link in the chat that will take you to our latest chronicle, which links out to a fuller document that describes some of the activities aligned with these primary areas of interest or of focus. Something you're going to see hit before the warm summer months is a newly designed WiLS portal that will improve the subscription renewal and invoicing process for our cooperative purchasing members, making that experience more reliable and streamlined. Our academic co-op members, we've already alluded to this, they are going to be seeing a new pricing structure that disentangles our WiLS fees from what vendors charge for scholarly resources, and will result in greater time savings, cost savings, and predictability for our members. We are diving deeper into thinking about how WiLS brings people together. Obviously, something like this is an example of that, but you heard several staff like Melissa, Vicky, and Kristen share their work on the communities of practice and the cohort models that ignite collaboration. We see every day in our work as consortium managers that crowdsourcing expertise and channeling shared interests is really a powerful way to accomplish big shared goals. So we'll be taking this year to explore more ways and to introduce some new programs that will help bring those great minds together to tackle common problems and find opportunities. We want to focus on scouting out new products and resources and developing responsive services that address real-time member needs. That was really made apparent to us in this past year. And most importantly, we want to live out the values that we have stated in service of our members and continuously find ways to put our values into practice within our operations. Some of you may have seen a survey sent out earlier this week to learn more about how you all are navigating equity, diversity, and inclusion in your libraries and communities. So I want to encourage you to watch a developing program we're putting together called the Social Justice Spotlight that is designed to use our WiLS platform to amplify grassroots organizations focused on anti-racism, equity, rights, and advocacy work. So with all of that, I just want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for spending time with us, allowing us the opportunity to share with you what's happening at WiLS. I think part of this whole new normal notion is that we can no longer take things for granted. Certainly we all learned that in regards to our own health and the ability to move freely in the world. At WiLS, we don't take you for granted. I know I speak for everyone when I say that we are incredibly grateful that we get to partner with all of you. So please watch for the recording of this meeting. Feel free to share with colleagues who may not have been able to join us. Along with that recording, we're going to give you a special sneak peek of our official 2020 annual report, which will touch on much of what we discussed today, and even in some more depth on what we've been up to this past year. I'll open it now up for questions or comments, and I'll answer them as best I can. You're welcome to turn on your microphone, video if you're able, or you can certainly put thoughts in the chat. We also respect your time and know that we've gone a little bit over, so obviously if you need to step out, please do, but we'll stay on as long as there are questions. Thank you. I'll also add, certainly, by all means, feel free to reach out to any of the presenters today individually. You'll find their contact information shared when we send out this slideshow, so you can contact any of the member panelists as well. I know that there's probably a lot of follow-up questions people have for them. Okay, well, I think you know where to find us. So by all means, reach out if you have questions. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what you need. We're here for you. And we really appreciate you spending so much of your time today. Have a great rest of your Friday and your weekend.